Okay, I think we are live on Facebook. Okay, it is taking some time. One second. Okay, just to confirm, are we streaming live on YouTube? If there's an audience out there, if they can comment. Okay, it's live. Awesome. Cool. I'm just checking Facebook also because we want our audience, we don't want our audience there to get missed out. Um, cool. Yes, yes, yes. Hi everyone. Uh, we're live on CodeChef with Prasanna Sankar. I'll talk about a bit about Prasanna. He's the co-founder and CTO of Rippling, which is now an American unicorn. He started off his journey at Triple IT Hyderabad, and then he went on to work for. Sorry,
NIT Trichy, man.
NIT Trichy.
NIT
Okay,
Trichy.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay. He started off his journey at NIT Trichy, and he went on to work for some really cool businesses after that. After which he started a couple of startups, and now he has built this tech giant called as Rippling. For those who do not know, Rippling is very popular for recruiting some of the best ICPC world finalists, some of the cream of the crop of the programming community. If you are a good CP, if you are a good computer programmer, Rippling wants you. It's like that. I mean, if you're really good at tech. So, which is why I'm really happy to have Prasanna with me today. Prasanna, I mean, to get started with, I can give a brief introduction, but then I think it will be best if it comes from you itself. So, yeah.
Cool. Hey guys, nice. Thanks for having me here. I studied in NIT Trichy, fell in love with computer science, and did a lot of programming contests. I was ranked one in India TopCoder during my college years, and twice Google Code Jam World finalist, twice ACM ICPC World finalist. So really fell in love with computers, and spent a lot of my college time doing these programming contests and stuff. And after graduation, my dream job was like like I always thought I really wanted to work on some deep technology, and started working at Microsoft Bing, which is a search engine crawler. They were building the team at the time. It was only like 30-40 people at the time, and hated my life in a big company. Couldn't stand being there for a year. Almost got fired pretty much, and left to Silicon Valley to try and live the American dream. That was 10 years ago, 2009. Kept starting companies. Um, um, like have the best moments, had the worst moments, and all that. But at the end of the day, like 4 years ago, we started Rippling, and the company has been very, very successful, more successful than I've imagined. And very, very lucky to have been here. So glad to meet all of you guys and answer any questions.
Okay, great. Thanks. Yeah, so maybe I'll get started with this particular question that we received from a lot of people. What you have achieved in this really short span of time. I mean, you didn't graduate a couple of decades ago, so you graduated very recently, and then what you've built is
What
really
decade?
inspiring. I mean, it's like uh, you know from a time like being an aspirant of cracking into the great companies, and then hiring those kind of people and becoming like the recruiter for the cream of the crop. Like it's like people aspire to get into Rippling. So how's the journey like? I mean, what are your success mantras or something? Tips about dreaming big or something like that, because you have done that yourself.
Yeah, thanks, man. So definitely, I mean, there is this old maxim which is be careful what you wish for in your 20s, for it shall be granted in your 30s,
Okay.
right? And it's kind of um, um, I mean, it is actually true. I mean, I didn't believe that. I mean, I asked for $1 million and freedom of life in my 20s. I didn't want to work at a big company. I hated my life. So all I wanted to have was like enough money that I don't have to work for the rest of my life. And back then I thought it was $1 million. That with that sort of intent, I came to the Valley, single-handedly strived at that. Today, it's what like couple, I'm worth like couple of $100 million, right? It has sort of rained gold. Um, you know, So I think the thing that I really, if there's one thing I want to convey to this group here, which is which is almost impossible to believe, the thing that changed my life is there is this thing called Y Combinator Startup School, right? So the first week that I came to the Valley, I was sitting on this on the podium, sitting on the spectator seat, just like you guys are right now. And there was Mark Zuckerberg, Mark Pincus, all these sort of tech entrepreneurs, up on the stage and talking. And they all said a very similar story, just like um, you know um, and you could totally see, well, it could happen to me. If it could happen to them, it could happen to me. I'm sort of no different than any of them. And the thing is, like, it is true, like, a lot of what it takes is actually just like believing that it can happen, and like striving for that for like a decade or so. I mean, this is a long compounding curve, so you have to like compound and ask for the same thing for a long time. And especially 20s is a very valuable period of time where you have no family, no obligations, nothing. You can play, you can really play. So I mean, the biggest thing I would say is like, whatever you ask for, you just make sure you ask for one thing consistently, and like ask for something big, because often you do tend to get it.
Right.
And and this is, I believe this is totally repeatable. And I recently gave a talk in my college about like some of the basic principles that if one follows, it produces pretty high odds of like $100 million. Like I would say like even a 10% odds of making $100 million, uh, and maybe like 50% odds of like millions of dollars, right? And it's totally repeatable. It sounds ridiculous to sort of claim that. That seems like a tall claim needs tall proofs. But I would sort of run you through those proofs in those talks, because I've seen that happen. The previous generation has seen that happen. The entire sort of cohort of peers, who came to the Valley with me. I know all these people, right? It's a tight knit group, and like everyone is insanely rich. And I go to my investors and talk about this sort of weird coincidence. What the fuck, everyone is rich, like how did this happen? It's not like, I mean, the odds are not very little. I mean, you would think that. And then they say, oh yeah, the same thing happened to my peers as well. So
Okay.
so I mean, it is ridiculous. It's almost impossible to believe, but that's sort of that's the nature of the beast, actually.
Okay.
And I would sort of run through some of the basic sort of principles that you could repeat. And those principles have sort of worked over generations now. It worked with my in my father's generation, in his father's generation, and so on. So I like, in the interest of time, I would perhaps just like share the link to that talk. Like, Mudit, you have the link, so if
Sure.
you can share it with your viewers, that would be great.
Sure. Sure. Do check out the comment section towards the end of the session. I'll definitely put it out there. Okay. We also have to make some interesting announcement towards the end of the session. So do stay tuned till then, and keep posting your questions. I see that a lot of people are already doing that. That's perfectly awesome. So okay, fair enough. I mean, this is an interesting thing that you mentioned. Like dreaming big is important, and it kind of compounds over the time. But let's say we're talking about a set of audience where people do not have a lot of people to look up to. I mean, especially we have a lot of audience who are from, let's say, tier 2 3 cities of India with not a very privileged background. So how do they look up to these people? Where do they find inspiration? I mean, uh, any suggestions for them?
Definitely. I mean, I think thanks to you guys, you're sort of making the world smaller. Like, YouTube and all these talks make the world much smaller. And what I would say is, like, people are actually very, very accessible. If you have like a genuine question or something, and you reach out, if people reach out to me, I respond back. And what I find is, like, most people are like that. You can find anyone and ask a genuine question. As long as it's like one or two, so it's perhaps easy to respond, people do respond back, right? So the world has compressed a lot. I actually have a lot of friends who came from those kind of very humble backgrounds, just randomly reaching out to me over the years. And they're sort of and I keep in touch because they ask interesting questions, right? Like, they ask questions about something at the frontier, frontier of understanding, right? The thing is, the thing you have to realize is like, me or anyone else are at this position because, we are driven by curiosity and, original thought. And most of the world does not have original thought. So, you're surrounded by peers which are just like going about their lives with no original thought. And any sort of reach out or any sort of connections with sort of some original questions, original thought, we are interested as well. So again, basically the best way to get in front of like interesting people is to actually have interesting thoughts, interesting ideas, interesting questions, follow interesting people. There are a bunch of books that I would recommend about, written by great and interesting people.
Okay.
um, like, so um, there is Zero to One by Peter Thiel. It sort of talks a lot about original thought and original ideas, how to have them, how to create history, how do historic moments happen. There is Anti-Fragile by Nassim Taleb. It talks about, again, the anomalies of history, like, one in a million events which keep repeating. um, you know um, and then it talks, there is a book about Warren Buffett called Snowball. Again, it talks about the powers of compounding over long periods of time, where suddenly there is very little competition. Like, if you ask for one thing for a long period of time, the end result tends to be, you're the richest person in the world, which is Warren Buffett, right? And then, Paul Graham's blogs, again, he has a lot of original ideas, and he created Silicon Valley as we know today. um, he's sort of like the founding father figure. So these are people with original ideas, who've done some really interesting work, and a lot of really interesting thoughts. So I mean, these are some people to get inspired from.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, thanks. I mean, uh, the audience must definitely keep a note of this set of books and go through them when it's possible. Raju is asking this particular question, on YouTube. How to do well at ACM, ICPC, and if you can talk a bit about it, because you're a two-time world finalist. You have recruited many ICPC world finalists. So, yeah.
um, so I mean, I would say it, as with um, all interesting things, it was much more easier in my times. um, a lot of success and luck is about riding trends, like large trends early. And I was able to ride the ICPC trend, the programming contest trend, before it was a trend, right?
Okay.
So to do anything sort of big in life, like, I mean, some of the sort of key constituents are to, one of the important ingredients is to be early on a bubble, on a big bubble, on a bubble that's getting created. And that's, in my opinion, that's the only way to create wealth. There is no other way. um, ICPC is one of the, or like programming contest is one of the big bubbles that I rode back in my days. um, so it's still underpriced. It's still worth doing. But it was definitely a lot easier in my times. I don't know if I could repeat that. um, um, you know Having said that, ICPC was really good for me. I mean, see, basically, um, um, I was not really good at academics, right? Like, physics or chemistry specifically. I was really bad at that. The thing is, like, in my mind, you learn a lot of facts and you can't do any inference in a lot of subjects. um, you know in in physics, maybe you learn a bunch of 5 facts and you can do 1 or 2 inferences. And in math, maybe you learn 5 facts and make 5 inferences. In computer science, you learn very little, right? Like, you learn, I mean, there are only 8 instructions or so, on the CPU. With that, you can do everything, like, add, subtract, multiply, jump, and, if, with that, pretty much, you can do everything on a CPU. So computers were great for me because, you learn very little and you can infer a lot. Um, and ICPC was, or these programming contests, are sort of really good usually, at least in my days, where there was not like a textbook of tricks that you need to memorize.
Right.
It was really good at, sort of, knowing very little and inferring a lot, right? It is really good at stimulating a thought train. It's actually really hard, in real life to sort of end up in a thought train, like, end up, you know, thinking about something for hours at a time, and like sort of building on facts, building on more, building on blocks and blocks and blocks of thought, right? Programming contest is like, one unique playground on which you can sort of build all these Lego blocks in all these interesting ways, and you can think for a long period of time. So my sort of breakthroughs in ICPC or like programming contests tend to have been like, where I've sort of gone to sleep with a very, very complicated problem, and just like, you know kept thinking about it, like kept thinking about what symmetries exist, what anomalies that I'm not exploiting, just like walking through, thinking through the problem space. What you don't realize, often contestants, at least newbie contestants, what they don't realize is the solution to a problem that you're seeing is like how to get from point A to point B, and you see that line is the solution, right? The shortest line is often the solution that you see. But when you solve the problem, you're sort of looking at all kinds of lines that either lead there or don't lead there, so the solution space, and all those lines are actually useful in other problems as well. So like that space, or the curvature of thought, is actually really interesting to explore in and of itself. So you're getting less than 1% of the value if you only know the solution from A to B,
Mhm.
because it's just there are so many different lines that you've not explored. So I would say, like, the best way to sort of improve in programming contest is to just like explore that space in your head and think through all those symmetries and anomalies that you could exploit. And one of the reasons why asking these kind of questions during interviews have become famous, although anything that becomes famous gets exploited and abused, but at least the reason it sort of got famous is, it is one of the purest ways to test original thought.
Okay, okay. Um, that's an interesting thing. I mean, when you talk about purest ways, like how do you? I mean, because it's objective in nature, people can directly see if they are able to kind of think through really complex problems. Is that what you were implying about?
Yeah. um I mean, what is the best interview problem? The best interview problem, or even zooming out from the interview problem, how do you, when you're talking to a smart person, how do you know if the person is smart? Just um if that person teaches you something uh, from the facts that you yourself know, from just the basic facts, he just like is able to stitch those things together in a new and interesting way.
Right.
That's when you say, oh, that guy is a smart person, right?
Yeah.
And interviews are like, and these programming contest problems are like a great way to sort of test for that, to throw sort of very abstract problems where the solutions are not complicated, right? Like it's I mean, a good interview problem, in my opinion, is like, it doesn't use any complex data structure. um, um, but it's sort of, there is like decent amount of travel, there is decent amount of like, different choices you could take, different ways you could sort of navigate, different solutions you could produce, and there is an objective way to sort of reach the optima. There is all these sort of sub-optimas that people could go into, um, and there is an objective way to reach an optima, and like and it's pretty, you need to sort of explore one or two or three sub-optimas. You reach there, you sort of put those patterns together and mix them in interesting ways to sort of reach the global optima, right? Like there is something that you could build onto it. So um so you know yeah, I think you're just like trying to test with ideas that everyone knows. Are you able to sort of Lego it and build like pretty complex structures on top of it?
Right. Right. Yep. And I think, I mean, you can comment upon it in a better manner. Uh, kind of being able to connect these dots to solve some really, kind of, as you mentioned, building the Lego blocks and then solving some really interesting stuff that doesn't seem very intuitive in the first place is what recruiters also, kind of get enticed about. I mean, it's not a skill that you build overnight. You build that over a lot of persistence and over a lot of time. I mean, yeah. Okay, so we
Yeah,
have
you
a,
build it by
yeah, sorry,
flexing those muscles. I mean,
sorry.
it's a muscle like any other. um Often people, the bad interview questions flex the knowledge muscle,
Hmm.
whether you know these tricks or not. The good interview questions sort of flex the sort of, deep thought, like the depth of the DFS
Right,
muscle. Like how do you get good at doing like really deep DFSs? By just like, doing a lot of them. Like, and the reason it's important is that um, often the one of the most important skills in life is actually to be able to look at very different zoom levels, to be able to look at like at not only at like, hey, what work am I doing, but like, what are the biggest problems of a manager, what are the biggest problems of the sort of business unit that I'm in, what are the biggest problems of the CEO and the company, and what are the biggest problems in the market. And like having those all those perspectives and zoom levels is actually really valuable. You know
right, right. We are getting a lot of questions on the platforms. I'll start taking them as well. Pratyush has asked, how many startups did you try before starting Rippling? I mean, by the way, there's an interesting story to this one. I mean, even the startup that he started before Rippling, even that had a pretty good success. I mean, but yeah, if you can answer this, he also asked like, what does Rippling exactly do, and can you give an anecdote on how you came up with the idea?
Sure. So I'll take the first one. How many startups have you done before Rippling?
Right.
So my own personal story is I hated my life at Microsoft. I sort of stopped there. I came to the Valley, lived and worked out of the Stanford dorms. One of my friends was studying there, so I slept on his couches and tried starting companies. Um, you know, when I came here, I didn't have any idea. I mean, I had a dumb idea, some ridiculous idea to sort of start with, and we thought, we are smart, we can just like come up with an idea, and like, we can sort of build a company out of this. That was the most dumb idea that I've ever had. Like, that never works. If people, bunch of smart people coming together and then figuring out what the idea is, like just that setup has never worked. It just like does not work. And the reason for that is like, startups are like, babies. They're sort of feeble and they're very easy to kill. And when a baby is born, if you try to ask, hey, could this be not the next Michael Jordan, which is what, which is the company that you're trying to build.
Yeah.
Of course, often you'll get answers for like why it won't be the next Michael Jordan, and the baby will die, right there. And the trick is, the reason, the way successful startups tend to come out is basically, yeah, sure, it's not a big deal, it's not going to be Michael Jordan, but it's my baby. I really love it, and I just like, this is the problem I want to solve. It's useful for me. Who cares if it's big or not? I mean, I would be happy if it's big, but who cares? It's still my baby. And the teams form around that idea. So that's the sort of only pattern that works, because every team that comes in, becomes a family member. They actually come in for the love of the baby, and not because that guy is my friend or something.
Right.
So that was a fatal mistake that I did, starting companies. So in the beginning, when I came in, for the first 18 months, nothing really worked. We tried like 12, 13 different ideas. Doesn't even matter. Nothing really worked for 18 months or so. We got better at launching stuff. We got better at getting users and hustling and all that stuff. But it didn't matter. I mean, it didn't matter if you had 100 users, and if you found a way to hustle to 1,000 users. It doesn't matter. Whether it has like, doesn't have a lot of correlation whether whether it'll go from 1,000 to like a million. You can hustle your way to like thousands of users, but it's giving us like a false sense of progress, when it wasn't progress at all, actually. um, and then 18 months in, we were trying like different ideas. Nothing was really working. We were getting really frustrated. My wife now, she was, my girlfriend back then, she was studying in Cambridge University, and there was a viral startup that was taking off in Cambridge called FitFinder. And she called me and said, hey guys, like, you guys can't come up with ideas for the life, for life. nothing really seems to be working. There is this startup that just took off in our campus. Why don't you just copy it? And we said, that's a great idea, actually. It's true that nothing we come up with tends to be a Michael Jordan. Something is working there. So why don't we just copy it? Which is exactly what I did. Stayed up all night, coded it, and next day launched it in Stanford. Next week, it spread through the whole of Stanford, and it kept going viral and viral and viral. And in 6 weeks we had 20 million page views. The company is called Likealittle.com. And in 6 months, Facebook and Google wanted to buy it for like 50 to 100 million dollars. Everything was going great and great and great. We didn't sell it, because we thought we could be the next Facebook. Why not? Didn't turn out that way. It turned out to be a fad. It was sort of like Foursquare, where everyone was using it at one point in time, and then people gave up. And it went to a zero, which was really painful. 4 years in, after doing 4 years of startup, nothing was really working. It was super painful. I got burnt out. I said, fuck it, I'm not starting another company again. I left the valley, actually.
Oh,
um, and called my girlfriend and said, hey, can we get married? um, you know so we got married, and she was working in Netherlands. I moved to Netherlands. I was the house husband, who was sitting there, and she was working and taking a break. I was pretty burnt out at the time, taking a break, thinking of new ideas. And not like startup ideas, but just like thinking about stuff in general, reading a lot of books and stuff. And the thing I realized was, what I really loved about my life so far was that time at Likealittle, where things were growing extremely fast. I was addicted to that sort of moment in time. Like the hyper growth was like very, very enticing to me. So came back to the valley, joined this company called Zenefits. I was not the founder. It was the fastest growing company in the world at the time. It went from zero to $50 million in ARR in 20 months. So given that I was looking for growth, and I was also looking for something not in the consumer internet where things can easily turn to be a fad, so I went with enterprise. So Zenefits was in the enterprise market, where customers are very sticky. They don't leave you that easily. um, so I joined there as a director of engineering. And a year later, the CEO got fired. There's something about me and luck. So the CEO got fired. And he was the best guy that I've ever worked with. So I told him I want to join him, and we both started Rippling about 4 years ago.
okay.
And like Zenefits and Rippling is sort of in a similar space. We are
Hmm.
trying to do an all-in-one product to run your company. It's sort of like an operating system to run your company, where everything from setting up a computer, getting the door access provisioned, to like getting a Gmail address set up for the new employee, Gmail account, email account set up for the new employee, to Slack being set up, to everything involving around running the company. We automate in the product
Okay.
using software. So that's what Rippling does, pretty much.
Okay. 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 Well, that's an interesting proposition as a recruiter too. I mean, yeah, that sounds good. I just want to pick up a few questions that we received in the registrations form that we circulated. So that's one of the venues where people kind of they put up their questions, and we definitely look at it. So I'll just pick a question from there. So there's a very quick question Shobit Gupta asks, is like, does Rippling hire interns? It's a very short question.
No, I mean, we don't actually. We don't hire
Okay.
interns. And the reason for that is, the company is growing extremely fast, and when there is hyper growth, often there is no like bandwidth available for mentorship and guidance.
Right.
Everyone is sort of required to kick the tires on day one. So we don't hire interns.
Okay. Okay. And this is next question, Mihir asked like how to prepare for working at the FANG companies, because an interesting information for the audience out there. Prasanna was one of those guys at an IT Trichy who cracked all the really good jobs on campus. Like he had offers from Microsoft, I think from Google also, and these were not just no disrespect to Indian offices, but then he got offers from the HQs, and so I think he's kind of the best person to answer this. So yeah.
Um, um, so I think a lot of the fang jobs, you know, have sort of been commoditized to some extent. Like, there is a lot of advice, like way more than, I can provide or I even know for how to sort of prepare for a fang job.
Right.
You know, yeah, there is all these books around, books that people have written on this subject. Um, you know, like and I mean, all these only matter if you're sort of in the border, right? Like, whether, I mean, the odds can depend slightly on your preparation and stuff. For me, like, I was ranked one in India, top coder, right? Like, that was already way ahead of like any hiring bar that these companies had. That, like, that it didn't sort of matter, like, um, um, but in general, programming contests tend to prepare people for these kind of the kind of questions that they tend to ask. They want to sort of see whether you've done something on your own versus whatever your college has told you.
Right.
um, you know and they want to see if you have some interesting thoughts and ideas about how the world works.
Yep.
This is not just fang, this is just like any employer wants to see these things. And yeah.
Okay, yeah, that's an interesting thing, and I mean, I think it's a very common suggestion given by a lot of people. Like, competitive programming is really helpful. People look at it, no doubt, as you mentioned. Beyond that, having really good thoughts and kind of building those pet projects, and where pet is just not for the namesake, people actually treat it like one. They're building it with a sense of purpose and an understanding. I mean, that kind of really makes the recruiter, interested in the other person. Yeah, okay. Cool. So I'll take up another question that is, being posted on our YouTube channel. You know, it's being asked like, how do you resist acquisition offers because you must have got multiple, I think, or is it not the case? I mean, uh, or when we're talking about kind of building these companies, when do you like, how do you envision that? Okay, this is where I want to get, and I'm willing to stick to that for a very long time. I mean, how do you, answer this particular question?
um So the acquisition offers, I mean, obviously in retrospect, it would have been better had I taken it, but of course you don't know that, you only know that in hindsight. Um,
Is
I
it for your
mean,
first startup or the current startup? Just curious. Sorry.
the acquisition offers happened with Likealittle, right? It was my
Okay. Yeah.
earlier
Right.
company, which sort of failed by now. So, um, and if you're doing really well, like there is a lot of buyers out there who want to buy you. Um, the thing with the internet is, or like, the thing with riding any huge bubble, is that, like, when do you sell is almost like the answer is almost never. I mean, like, because it has a huge compounding runway
Right.
that you can compound through. And I think you want to sort of find something where it's okay. Where you're sort of confident on the 10-year trend. And you know you want to stick to it. I mean, all big wealth has been created that way, by being early in a bubble and sort of riding it for a long period of time. So yeah, in terms of acquisition offers, the right time to sell when you think something is not working, or something is broken, or you've ran out of ideas of what to do with that thing. That's the right time to sell. um, but if things are working, if things are sort of compounding, that's actually really rare. It doesn't usually happen. Like less than point, I mean, I won't even quote a stat, because it's just extremely rare that things are sort of compounding is running uninterrupted. um, um, and as long as you have ideas to sort of keep the engine that way,
Right.
you just never sell. So that was the first question on acquisition offers and stuff. Like, what is the second one?
I think yeah, it was around this one itself. Like, when do you kind of understand that this is where I want to stop and this is where it has reached? I mean, but as you mentioned, as you answered, right, when you're in a bubble, you practically never sell. And I think this is what a lot of people have also said. You can comment upon it. A lot of times, like after things have started to grow, when you're getting those kind of hyper growth, uh, your like money is obviously a good aspect about it, like wealth creation, but at the same time, the purpose that you're fulfilling also kind of drives you for a very long time, and uh, there's a sense of attachment to that as well. I mean, um, okay. So coming on to the next question that we have received, okay, it says that okay, I think this is one. This one is from someone at your college itself, like one of your juniors. He asked like, Aman asked like, what are your suggestions for students who graduate from your college? I mean, NIT Trichy, but did not land their dream job or didn't start something on their own. I mean, they wanted to do that, but they couldn't do it right away. So, what should they do to kind of get on the right track as soon as possible?
Um, so in terms of I mean, my college are not, the suggestions are the same.
Right.
um, in terms of some of the steps that I was mentioning to create sort of a massive wealth or a massive impact or a massive learning curve. um, One of the top things, in fact, what this thing contributes to like 50% of 50% of value of this whole entire thing. One of the top things that matter is moving to the center of the world, right? And wherever you are in your career path, you want to think about that question very, very carefully. What's the center of the world? Where are the most ambitious people moving today? And where are the places where the most interesting things are happening? Like if Alexander the Great was born today, what would he be doing and where would he be going, right? And at every point in time, that tends to be like one center for a particular action. And you want to sort of get there, and plan your career in a way that you can get there. So if it's like tech and startups, obviously in the world it's sort of San Francisco, and in India it's sort of Bangalore. And the action quality at those places and the people quality and the ambition quality is just dramatically different from any other spot in the world. And you would see that in all sorts of anomalies, right? Like salaries, if you just like take one train, your salary is doubling, and that's the market's way of telling you that, hey, this is actually the center of the world. um, right? So you want to move to the center of the world, so align your career, and do whatever it takes to get to the center of the world. That would be sort of the first step, pretty much.
Okay, okay. But what about those like who could not possibly kind of who doesn't seem look at it as a feasible option? So do you believe that it's practical for everyone if they want to do it, or
Absolutely.
yeah? Okay, okay, yeah. And I
Absolutely.
think
See,
hmm,
I mean, things are not feasible in like 1 year, 2 year time frames, and everything is feasible in like 10-year time frames. If you want to walk, if you want to like walk to Europe on foot, is it feasible? Like often, practically people will say, no, it's actually not feasible. I mean, that's not true. I mean, you of course, if you keep walking, just like for 10 years, 20 years, you would reach Europe.
yeah,
Uh, uh, so, I mean, like on a long enough time scale, everything is feasible.
right, right. And I think it's important to kind of have that ambition for a long time, not just get demotivated in the process. I'm sure, like even as you mentioned, you had a lot of yeah. Sorry, go ahead, saying something.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, I got demotivated as well. Like you were mentioning, I sort of gave up and came back and all that, right? And you won't do it if the walk is not beautiful, just intrinsically.
Yeah,
And there are going to be rough moments and everything, and it's the whole masala. uh, there is sweet, there is spice, and all of them put together
yeah,
makes that journey interesting.
yeah, yeah. Now there's an interesting question coming up. Sayan asks on YouTube. Okay, so what are the qualities that Rippling looks for when it's looking to hire, when it's talking about hiring the best people? Like, what does it look at? And apart from that, I'll add to, like add a follow-up question to this one. Like, let's say talking about, how should one become good at, good enough to become a potential candidate for Rippling. At the same time, what does Rippling bring on the table? I mean, why should someone choose Rippling over, all the, so Rippling is one of the biggest recruiters in the top IITs, but then why should someone choose Rippling over others? If you can answer that.
Yeah, and it's the same thing, right? So basically, often every company needs to have an answer to both of the questions, which
Right.
with the same answer, because it doesn't make sense to hire someone for something and then like them not get that, right? So I mean, we basically our thing is very simple. We look for two things and we provide the same two things to people. High CPU, which is, how many gigahertz per second does your brain operate in? That's what we're looking for with all these sort of contest questions or whatever, right? That's like, that's one of the top dimensions that we're looking for. And I can walk into why. And then the second thing that we're looking for is entrepreneurial, right?
Okay.
Do you have almost an aversion to rules and processes? Do you sort of like hate your life? If it's very predictable, you know, um, are you sort of complaining why something is not happening, or do you go and make it happen? With like very little to no resources. So we look for high CPU and entrepreneurial, right? Um, and if you join Rippling, what do you get? You get high CPU and entrepreneurial, right? Like, you get people who are like extremely smart, who are sort of ambitious. They're sort of thinking about problems from first principles. Like, we don't do sort of patterns that someone in a book, in a textbook has written. We throw that away and think for yourself. High CPU and entrepreneurial. We have around 10% of our companies people who've already started, who are ex-entrepreneurs. They've tried companies before, succeeded, failed, whatever. 10% of our engineers specifically are ex-entrepreneurs. And the reason we sort of look for and provide these things is basically, Rippling is a bunch of small business units. There is the payroll business unit, there is the HR business unit, there is we provide all these sort of software packages
Right.
to automate these units, these departments that companies have. There's the IT business unit and so on. And each product, Rippling product or module, is its own business. It has its own market competition. So a team of like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 people need to sort of compete with 1,000-person $10 billion company, which is the competition, and take market share away from them, right? That's the sort of Rippling challenge. And being an umbrella of and being able to sell all in one, makes it possible that the team of like 5 people, 10 people are able to sort of grab market share from this gigantic 10-year-old giant in each of these verticals. So high CPU and entrepreneurial, you need high CPU because when something is growing extremely fast, the problems that you're solving today is extremely unlikely to be the same problem that you're solving next month, right?
Yeah.
Because when an organization grows, all kinds of bottlenecks develop. you know uh, this is the limiting factor to our growth, right? So you put your engineers on that limiting factor, they go and solve that limiting factor, and you grow a lot. And then you hit the next limiting factor, so all your engineers go and solve the next limiting factor, and you grow a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
All these bottlenecks develop. And the thing is, these bottlenecks keep changing. um, if those bottlenecks are the same, you could hire people with experience in that solving that one exact bottleneck. But if they keep changing all over the place, you need people who can think from first principles and act really fast. And that's why we're sort of looking for high CPU people. And that's exactly why we're looking for entrepreneurial people, because you can't train people, hey, it's not okay to take 6 months to ship something, because this is the nature of the product, this is the nature of the growth curve. You're looking for really entrepreneurial people who can't say the 10 reasons why something can't be done or why something is risky, but they can say the one reason why it could be done.
Right. Right. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And it's important to look at that one particular reason and kind of chase that bit. And I think, like even that was a very relatable narration that you gave, and uh, kind of this also gives a very big sense of gratification when you're kind of the impact that you're making, like is humongous when compared to the the market impact that one single individual is making. So as you mentioned, you have a team of, let's say, a team of 5 or 10 would be making would be disrupting the work of some really big giant out there. So that's a really interesting thing out there. Okay. Yeah. So I'll just kind of take up a few questions from YouTube. So first of all, okay. So I'll definitely post the video that he mentioned. Yeah, the Janta is asking like, "वो video डाल दो ना आप करके." I'll do that. Yeah, don't worry. Okay, and yeah, there is a team also in working in the background who is kind of posting the question comments on YouTube and different channels. So keep a track on them; they are helpful. Okay, now coming on to the next question, like when you're talking about kind of like Pratyush is asking again, like sorry, Anurag is asking, how do you keep yourself motivated and not give up in the middle? I mean, there were times when you hit the kind of, you mentioned that you kind of hit the rock bottom. Uh, and you mentioned that you got up and it's at a pretty insane level right now. So, uh, what was that inflection point where you felt that, okay, bus, abhi, I need to get started again and yes, I need to make it work again?
Yeah. You know, the thing, I mean, I can talk about myself, but I can also slightly zooming out. You know, Nowadays when I sort of evaluate people, I ask this question about whether they've escaped the matrix, whether they've escaped this video game, right? So, if you zoom out long enough, you sort of realize, that this is what I realized, like, on the 1 year or so that I was on a break. Um, and if you zoom out long enough, you kind of realize, um, it's all a video game anyway. You're just playing this game, you want the ups and downs. And like if in Super Mario, if there was like gold coins everywhere and you just press the right arrow and just like keep eating those gold coins, you won't play that game, right? Like, I mean, that's just insane. I mean, why would you play that game? Yet 99.9% of people live life that way. They just like keep eating those gold coins and just keep pressing the right arrow. um, you know um, and so once that's ruled out, then the only option is to sort of try these games where you can fall and get hurt. you know and if you try those games where you can fall and get hurt, you're going to get hurt. I mean, it's just like natural.
Yeah.
But just like in Matrix and the Neo, when you sort of fall down, you kind of bounce back. This blood, you can laugh at this blood at some level. And at some level you're also seeking that blood. I mean, once it's a video game, I mean, you're sort of like looking for that. Oh, well, oh, I made it. Okay, maybe like how much bigger can I, bigger can I jump, like, without getting hurt? And you only know it by like sort of getting hurt a few times. So once you sort of zoom out and look at that perspective, like, I mean, you get demotivated, you give up and stuff, but at the end of the day, you want to play. After, you're tired, you don't want to play anymore for the day, but like, you come back and you play.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. I think it's important to take that call that, okay, I want to play this game. I mean, yeah, it was an interesting example of Mario out there. Yeah. Uh, I hope the PMs of Mario are not getting offended by this one in case they're watching it. But yeah, but
No, I
okay.
mean, Mario is a great game for that reason, right?
Yeah, yeah, right. Absolutely. Did you play Mario? I mean, this is just a random question.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
Okay. Okay. Nice. Interesting. Cool. I'll move on to the next question that we have received. Okay, from our registrations section this time. Okay. Um, Okay, so I'm not talking about the placements aspect and competitive aspect of it because we've already talked about it in brief. Okay, and you have answered that. And plus, we're also kind of answering that in all our other sessions. So there are plenty of resources out there. I think I'll move on to this very interesting thing that you mentioned earlier, like about the success mantras that you have followed. Okay, like you mentioned 4 or 5 success mantras. Can you talk about them, to our audience, like what are they about and uh, yeah, if you can give some suggestions out there.
Yeah, definitely. Moving to the center of the world I spoke about, that's the biggest thing. That's like, if you follow that one thing, like 50% of the job is done. And the reason for that is, like, if you look at history, the best film directors sort of just like lived together, and like Godfather's director or whatever, right? There are all these cliques of success that get created. And as I told you, I've seen that in my cohort, I've seen that in my sort of previous cohort. My own dad, he sort of ran away from his house early, and while he was in college, and he came to Chennai to become a Tamil writer. And he lived in a room with 4 people. Actually, this was like, I don't know, 40 years ago or something. And of those four people, three people were very successful. My dad was like, one of the top, five writers in Tamil at his peak. And, one guy was a top film director and, so on and so forth, right? So that's 3 and 4 hit rate over a 25-year compounding period. In technology, things happen faster, right? So,
Right.
it's extremely important to move to the center of the world. You have to be where the action is. Um, that's one. And then the second thing is, you kind of have to realize that life is more and more non-linear, actually. All effort is not equal. Like one day will change your life. And most people, the biggest blunder that I've seen people do is like not knowing that day is special. Actually, they sort of treat that day or that opportunity as like any other day, and that would be a huge mistake. For example, when I was in college, I was 18 years old. I was ranked one in India in Google Code Jam. They were calling me to the world finals, and I didn't even have a passport, right? So I called my dad and said, hey, listen, I'm happy that I won, but I'm sad that I can't go to the world finals in Silicon Valley. um, it's in a month and I don't even have a passport. I need to get a passport, I need to get a visa. It's just impossible. And my dad said, wait right there, I'll come over. And he came over the next day. I never went to college for the next 1 week, 2 weeks, and my dad never went to office for the next 2 weeks. And we knocked on 100 doors, like politicians' doors, training and placement departments' doors, 100 doors, and like a few opened. And I did get on a flight to Google Code Jam All Finals. And I remember one specific incident where we had to catch a train to go to the passport officer, go meet that passport officer, and there was a long queue on the railway station. And if we stood in that queue, we're going to miss the train. And my dad said, let's take a shot. And he went to the first guy in the queue and said, hey, can you get a ticket? It's a really important day for my son. And the first guy said, sorry, please wait in line. The second guy said, sorry, please wait in line. The third guy cursed in some bad words or something. And within the first 5 people, one guy said yes, and we got the tickets. Of course, like, that's I've seen that early, and I've done that, like, many times in my life. Not exactly that, but I sort of like in YC startup school, when everyone was sort of giving a talk, Mark Zuckerberg and all these people are giving a talk. I had a letter in my hand saying, hey, if you sign this, I can get a US visa, US work permit. I went to the first guy, the second guy, the third guy. I went and asked 50 people, 2 people signed, and I got a US visa. These things work. You want to know, at what point in time, it's such a special opportunity that you just like massively sort of bend the social norms of what is acceptable to do, and like how much hustle you want to put in. um, people don't really know what is a special moment, and two, how much they could bend and flex the outcome by just like hustling. So that combos are sort of like extremely important. Again, if you sort of think of it as a video game, you kind of do know these sort of cheat codes and shortcuts, right? You don't use it all the time, but if it's a special moment in time, of course you're going to use your accumulated powers. And these incidents are sort of those accumulated powers for me. You don't do it every day because it's very painful. uh, you don't do it for every train that you get on, right? But there are those trains that you have to get on.
Yeah.
And if nobody sort of gave us that got us that ticket, we would have got on the train without the ticket.
Yep.
Like without a ticket, like, make no mistake.
Yep. Yep. Okay. Well, that's an interesting thing. I mean, certainly, and it's. I also noticed that it's kind of interesting how you drew an inspiration from one small incident that kind of really had a compounding effect in its own. There have been cases actually. I mean, uh, where people could not have actually boarded that train. They didn't get that opportunity. But then, uh, going by the approach that you have mentioned, they would still approach other folks and kind of keep on trying to crack uh, the pot of gold eventually. I think we have just 4 minutes left, so I'll quickly take up the questions on YouTube. So there is this one question asked, like, asked by Sayan, and there are people, kind of adding a plus one to it. So what is the prime factor that led to your excellence in comparative coding? If you can quickly answer that bit, like, what is that one thing? Because you really made a mark out there. So yeah.
Yeah. So again, I was not really good at academics and stuff. And the thing that I sort of got very early from my dad was, the thing that everyone is striving for, that's the only thing that you don't strive for. That's the most overrated thing, right? So you're sort of looking for something special, something that's sort of like off, that's like off the radar in most senses. And computer science was extremely special for me because, again, you could do a lot of thought travel, very, very deep, and you could do a lot of original work. um, and um, I got drawn to that. The moment I had a computer, I got really drawn to that. And I fell in love with it. And and I kept doing these obscure things. Everyone knows these programming contests today. I was I obviously, that's where the lion's share of my efforts and the results came from. But I also did a bunch of other things. Like, I did I sort of spent 6 months looking at this contest called IOCCC, International Obfuscated C Coding Contest. And I was trying to understand, I spent 6 months trying to understand one program, one chess program. It was sort of in the shape of an inverted knight playing chess 12 moves deep with the AB alpha beta pruned search. It was just beautiful. And, there is a lot of beautiful things like that I spent a lot of time looking into, thinking about all these obscure things which are off the mainstream. I think the key lesson there is to sort of find things that are sort of off the beaten path, like, off the mainstream. And and you also have to be right about a bubble. If it's, you want to be, you want to find something that's like, that's going to be, a huge bubble, eventually. And you want to sort of really enjoy the beauty of it and do original work in it.
Okay. Okay. Um, well, thanks. So I'll take up the last question that we received through our registrations form. There are questions coming in the I think a lot of questions have been answered if you look at kind of talking about making it big in the world of startups or CP, how to become good at CP or all those things, cracking good jobs. So I won't repeat those questions. I mean, I'll take up this interesting question that has been posted, and it is a pretty short one. I mean, it comes from a lot of people. That even we see that. So Sai Abhijit asked this particular question: do you think that students from streams other than CSE be experts in coding, like apart from computer science, be experts in coding? Yeah.
Um, I think so. I absolutely think so because, I mean, if you look at these streams, right? These were created for a 30-year-old or a 40-year-old world.
Right.
These. I mean, academia, is sort of lagging behind what the markets need by over 30 years, right? And what's the proof for that? Like, just take any professor in your department and see whether he'll get a job. Like, the answer would be no, actually. I mean, that tells you, like, how behind to the market the academia is, right? So these things get sort of stuck and saturated, and it takes sort of 30 years for the market's needs to sort of get pushed down into academia. And that because unacademy is growing extremely fast, or like, all these sort of coding classes, white hat junior is growing extremely fast. That that the mainstream academia has not figured out how to respond to it. And all these sort of startups are taking, providing the markets with what it needs. So you always want to sort of look at the markets and not the academia. And to the extent that whatever streams that you're in, is not computer science, or like it's not something that the market is pulling, you just have to admit that you made a wrong choice and just cut your losses. And just like look at it from first principles and ask, hey, what are the opportunities in the world that exist today, and how can I contribute to that?
Right. Right. Yeah, and especially as you mentioned, there are players who are really kind of making a difference in the open education space. If somebody wants to learn, they can go and learn from anywhere. There are online communities out there where they can start making a mark. In fact, a lot of engineers I mean, I'm not sure about a lot of part, but a few engineers I know of who have worked with Rippling are from non-CSE backgrounds. But if they
Absolutely.
were good enough to crack a job at Rippling, uh, you can also do it. I mean, like people can achieve a lot of things just by dreaming for it. Okay, so here comes the important announcement because we are almost done with the time. So Rippling will be looking at the top programmers in our coming monthly contest, like the 3 monthly contests. And if you're good, then they we'll be looking at you from the hiring perspective as well. Also, you can look at the contest to understand what really makes Rippling really awesome out there. So do check that out. And yeah, thanks a lot, Prasanna, for being here. I think it has been a very interesting conversation. The audience enjoyed it a lot. There are a bucket list of questions coming in, but I mean, which are a lot of them are repeated and everything. But the audience enjoyed it. I mean, the interaction level clearly shows that. So thanks a lot for being with us today. Yeah.
Cool, man. Thank you so much for having me, and I'm happy to answer any questions. I'm not sort of running out of time or something, so I'm happy to keep going. But feel free to also reach out to me. My email is prasanna@rippling.com if anyone wants to, write to me about anything.
Right. Okay. And I'll also post, the ones who are kind of asking these questions over and over again. I'll definitely post those books and the link of the video. Don't worry about that. Okay. Check out the comment section. Thanks. Do hit the like button, share it with the people, whom you believe would kind of benefit from the session. And thanks a lot. Yeah. Bye. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mudit.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Thanks. Bye. Cheers.